All right, today's presentation is going to focus on emotional behavioral disabilities in the classroom. Most specifically, we're going to focus on teachers in the Freshman Academy. So, statistic for today. Based on data from last semester, 84% of students in the Freshman Academy who have received a behavioral referral or write-up qualify for special education services under the eligibility of EBD. This percentage is entirely too high and indicates that we as an academy are not meeting the behavioral or academic needs of the students. This high percentage is a complete reasoning for us to meet today and go through this training. Our target goal for next semester is to decrease this number from 84% to 30%. Learning objectives for today. So today, I'm gonna try to give you 3 things to take away from today, and hopefully you'll be able to take something from this and put it into your daily practice in the classroom. One is gaining a better understanding of EBD and how it adversely affects our students. If you're able to understand what it is and the exact definition and how it affects students, then we're going to be more effective as educators. The second thing is to integrate the conceptual models of EBD, and there's 4 of them we're going to talk about today, into daily practice through deeper understanding of each model. And the third one is going to be able to apply the 4th and final model we'll talk about, which is the behavioral model, into your daily classroom practices. And today we're going to go through strategies to incorporate. So first off, what is EBD? Well, EBD is emotional behavioral disabilities, and most widely for educators and people who work in the special education field. They all accept the NMHS EC definition. And yes, it's a pretty long acronym. So the term emotional or behavioral disorder means a disability that's characterized by behavioral or emotional responses in school that's different from the appropriate age, culture, or ethnic norms. And this typically adversely affects educational performance. And the educational performance that we're talking about today includes academic, social, vocational, and personal skills. So such as a disability, it meets the criteria here with A, B, and C. An EBD is more than temporary. It's more than a temporary expected response to stressful events and environment. It is B, consistently exhibited in 2 different settings, and at least one of which is school-related. And C, it is unresponsive to direct intervention in the general education, meaning that it's unresponsive to something that you would typically use as an intervention with typical students. And the other thing to note here is that emotional behavioral disorders can coexist with other disabilities. This category may also include children with schizophrenia and other disorders as such. Now, if you look at statistics from the CDC, there's no known cause, and approximately 8.3 million children between the ages of 4 and 17 have been seen by physicians for EBD symptoms, and 2.9 million children have been prescribed medication for these difficulties. Now, this is the definition that's widely accepted. The other definition that is federal, for the most part, it's remained unchanged since its adoption back in 1975. It's pretty vague, and it has a lot of exclusionary criteria, and it doesn't take into consideration things like differing cultures and differing social norms. Some things that also go with EBD, some characteristics of it, what you'll typically see with students who are EBD, who have EBD. They're usually hyperactive. They may display some aggression, some withdrawal, a little bit of immaturity, and often they display some type of learning difficulty. So next we're going to take a look at the conceptual models of EBD in practice. So there's 4 main models. The first one is the biological model. The second is the psychoeducational model, and the third is the ecological model. The fourth model, the behavior model, is the one that we're going to put more focus on today. So the first one, the biological model. In a nutshell, the biological model is basically medical intervention. This is, for the most part, it's fairly new due to recent medications and things being done through the doctor over the past 100 years or so. With this, there's two hypotheses. One is that EBD is caused by physiological flaws, generally something in the brain, something hormonal, something genetically. And the second one is that EBD can be controlled through medication. What you should note out of this is that there are very few implications in regard to classroom practice. This isn't something that we can necessarily control, but we can, as educators, control the environment that the students are in. The next model here is the psychoeducational model, and this is a model that really focuses on the reflective piece of education and intervention. The hypothesis is that unconscious motivations and underlying conflicts are what's affecting students with EBD, and those are, that's the hypothesis of what we can change and affect. The intervention in terms of unconscious motivation and underlying conflicts is generally circled around group therapy, reflection, and planning. And through those, they're focused on three things, and that's recognizing motivation, observing consequences, and planning responses. So ultimately, the goal is to change the intrinsic motivation of the student here. The third model, which is the ecological model, is the hardest intervention that we can model or follow or help with students, and this is basically because we only see students at school. And the hypothesis with this is that behavior is based and controlled by the child's entire social system, and the student is considered a giver and a receiver in social transactions. So the interventions are supposed to impact the entire social system to be successful, and not just the school. And a lot of times what we can do at school to help with this model is, providing the student with a peer role model, or providing the student with active models through teachers and people we see outside of the school. But ultimately, this is the hardest one that we can impact due to limited time with students at school. The final model, which we're going to spend most of our time focusing on here, is the behavior model, and this is the most relevant and effective model regarding teachers and education. So this model has two major assumptions that we're going to look at. The first one is the problem is the behavior itself, and the second assumption is that behavior is a function of environmental events. What should be noted here is that to fix the maladaptive behavior, according to Kaufman and Landrum, you need to change the antecedent and or the consequence. So how do we incorporate the behavioral model? And why are we focusing on the behavioral model? Well, I just stated before, the behavioral model is the most useful to teachers. It's the easiest one that we can change. It's based solely on learning and teaching, with the primary focus in the classroom. What should be kind of noted here as a weakness is, we can only change or measure what we can see. So checking internal motivation and change is next to impossible. Another thing that you should probably keep in mind too, when we talk about the behavioral model and incorporating these models into your classroom, is that data shows that teachers and schools who incorporate a zero tolerance policy, they're largely ineffective. So what I'm saying and meaning by this is it's important to be patient when you're incorporating these models, and it's very important to choose your battles. We can't expect that the minute we implement one of these strategies, we're going to get complete change from the students. So how do I incorporate this model? So it's incorporated in two places. One is the classroom antecedents, and the other one is the classroom consequences. So the antecedents are pre-behavior and the consequences are post-behavior. The consequence is not necessarily something bad. So if you think about this in terms of running, how we're going to fix this antecedent consequence. So no matter what, if the student's a runner, they're going to be moving from point A to point B. Now we can influence their success from point A to point B by providing antecedents and by providing consequences, meaning that an antecedent would be having the runner stretch or run warm-up laps or bound or do some practices out of their blocks. So getting them ready prior to the event, getting them ready prior to the non-wanted behavior. Consequences that we might provide, this if you think in terms of a runner, this is leaning into the finish line. It's running cool-down laps, it's stretching, it's getting a medal, having something to look forward to and getting something for the effort that you put in. So both the antecedent and the consequence ultimately are going to lead to a better student or a faster runner or a more motivated student or a more motivated runner. Success is motivating, and especially when it's rewarding. So we're gonna walk away with a couple of antecedent strategies today. Number one is the high preference procedure strategy. So this strategy is giving the student a number of preferred types of a problem or practice with the integration of non-preferred tasks or activities. So a good example of that is if we're working on negative numbers and the addition of negative numbers, if the student struggles with adding negative numbers, we start out with multiple additions of normal numbers, and let's say we have five problems of normal addition. We make the last two or three incorporate negative numbers, and we slowly build from that, getting the student used to working that. And a couple places to incorporate this can be in bell work and warm-ups, and independent work and homework. The next thing that we should be looking to incorporate is, it's pretty similar to what you guys are already doing in most of your classrooms anyways. It's called model, rehearsal, and feedback. You may know this as I do, you do, we do. The pre and post data shows that when we follow this model, when compared to a control group, students are more successful. And in this, the process is where teachers model a skill, so I do. They have the students rehearse the skill, which is you do. And the third is, while they're rehearsing, we provide direct and positive feedback towards the performance. The next ones are consequence strategies, and these are pretty interesting. They're very similar in terms of interesting, I should say. The first one is, the token systems, the token economy. The strategy is just basically providing points of tokens to students for retention of information or performing a positive task. This is a very typical and a very normal thing, and we can incorporate this into a couple of different places. Whole group incentives, individual incentives, and daily behavior and or retention of information. So when we looked at the controlled group versus the control group versus the experimental group, they were almost twice as likely to retain information and be more successful. And that was according to the study done by Ryan, Pierce, and Mooney in 2008.